Welcome back to the second lesson in this module. We are going to continue from where we stopped in the last class on functions. Okay, so I think I'll prefer to create a new file. Functions continued. Alright, so let's continue looking at the things we are looking at. Okay, so we have looked at returning a function. Okay, so in the same vein, we can have different return types also. Alright, so like string, right? So return age, for example. Let me say return sum, the sum of two numbers. Okay, now you can see that as long as I don't have this, as long as I don't have a return statement, I'm getting an error here. It says the body might complete normally causing null to be returned, but the return type is int. But the return type int is a potentially non-nullable type. So as long as this is not void, because void functions, in void functions we just execute whatever statements we have. All right, we don't need to return anything. But if we specify a return type, right, we must return something. Okay, we must return a value. All right, that is according to the return type we have. Okay, I cannot return a double here unless I have a double, unless I specified the return type of my function to be a double. Okay, and I have to return a value unless this is nullable. Unless I say this this function has a return type of nullable double. All right, just as we did in the previous module when we looked at null values. All right, so I can say int area, no, it should be a double area equal to 100 times volume times, because volume is length times weight. Now these are random values, okay, times height. So I can return volume. Okay, so when I call it and print, I will have the value of this operation, double. Okay, because the return type of this function is nullable double, right? I'll have to make this nullable double as well. Yeah, so that's it. Okay, so let's move on to other things. Parameterized functions. Okay, so parameters are a mechanism to pass values to functions. Okay, so we can give values to functions actually, right? Parameters form a part of the function signature. The parameter values are passed to the functions to the function during its invocation, unless explicitly specified. The number of values passed to a function must match the number of parameters defined. Okay, so it is mandatory for required positional parameters. It is mandatory to pass values to required parameters during function call. Now, we have an example here. Okay, we have an example here. It says the following code snippet declares a function test param with two parameters, namely n1 and s1. Okay, so this is I would like to give my own example here. Okay, for better understanding. Let me clean this off. Or let me just come here. So first we have our main function. Alright. Now let's say I have a function. I have a function void about me. Alright. And this function is just it talks about me, right? Yeah, and inside here I have my name is Ebuka. I live in Nsukka. I am 20 years old. Alright, that's not my real age, by the way. So this is about me. I can decide to add another detail about me. So I weigh 70.5 kg. Alright, so you already know that if we had to call this function, it will just give me all of this, right? My name is, I live in, I am years old, I weigh kg. Alright, so you already know that if I were to call this function, to just spit out this thing, return it for me. Alright, but let's say I want to write this function in such a way that many people can call it, right? This function is just it's talking about one person. Alright, it's giving us the detail of one person. I want to write this function in such a way that maybe students in a class can each call this function and pass in their name, their address, their age, and their weight here individually. Alright, so what I can do is I can introduce parameters, something called parameters. Alright, so I'll introduce the first parameter, which is the name. Okay, which is the name. So instead of Ebuka, I'll just say name. My name is name. Alright, and then another string, of course. String, I'll call this address. So I'll just interpolate address here. Remember what we did with string interpolation, right? Yeah, it is in cases like this that it comes in handy. So the next thing is age. Age is an integer, so I'll have age here, and of course weight, double weight. Okay, so the person will have to pass his or her age or her weight here, kg. Alright, I want the weight and the kg to be together, so I'll just do this. Okay, so now as you can see, my function call has some errors, All right, it is pointing out some errors. And what does it say? It says 4 positional arguments expected by about me, but 0 found. So it's saying that it is expecting arguments for all these parameters. All right, so these are called parameters, right? And then when you call your function, you're supposed to provide arguments for each of these parameters. All right, so I'm going to do that now. So first I have name. Okay, I'm going to pass in my name first. Okay, and then next I have address. Now you must pass in the correct data type. Okay, I cannot pass in any other data type here because what comes next is address, and address is a string. Okay, so I'll have to use a string here. Next is the age, 20. Right, and then next is weight, 70.5. All right, so if I were to call this function, as you can see, I have this. Okay, my name is Ebuka. I live in Nsukka. I am 20 years old. I weigh 70 kg. All right, so as I said earlier, I wanted to make this function to be such that multiple people can call it. Right, you can call it. You can, come and tell us about yourself using this function by calling this function. All right, so you can come and say, you can come and call this function as well. Now you can see all these parameters are now you're now expected to pass in your own details. All right, so you can say my name is Kingsley. I live in Enugu. You can pass in your own age here and your weight, 68.0. Okay, another person can come here, maybe a female. Ada, address, Lagos, age 22, weight 79. All right, so this is a basic use case of parameters. All right, so that's simply what they are trying to explain here. There's nothing much in it. Okay, that's what they are trying to explain here. Parameterized functions, yeah. So next up is optional parameters. Optional parameters can be used when arguments need not be compulsorily passed for a function's execution. The parameter can be marked optional by appending a question mark to its name. The optional parameter should be set as the last argument in a function. All right. So let's go into this. It says optional positional parameter. To specify optional parameters, use square brackets. Okay, let's see. To specify optional positional parameters, use square brackets. Okay, let's try this. Let's make maybe a few of these to be optional. Let me make string. Let me make address and age that way to see if it works. It doesn't seem to work. Okay, so this syntax is actually all right. And they said to make it the last Yeah. So right now, address and age are optional. I don't make address. I want, okay. So I simply just made address and age optional. Okay. So, and they said here that um when you make parameters, right? When a parameter is marked as optional, it should be set as the last argument in the function. So, which is what I am doing. Alright, I'm setting the parameters. I'm setting the arguments for these parameters as the last arguments in the function. Okay, and as I'm doing that, the error is going away. Okay. Alright. So that's what it is. Alright. So you can actually make them optional. Now they are optional, right? They are optional, meaning that you can decide not to um, not to pass them. Not to pass them in your function. Alright. So that's going to be it for today. We'll continue in the next class. Thank you.